In contrast to the stark distinction historians tend to make between concrete and neo-concrete art, in her interviews and texts of the 1950s, Pape argued that her prints were part of an evolving continuum and asserted the suitability of the woodcut medium to the aims of concretism and neo-concretism. Here I'm showing you 2 pages from a very important forum in Rio for concrete and then neo-concrete ideas, the Sunday supplement of the Jornal do Brasil, where 2 works by Pape are illustrated, as well as texts that I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail. Though Pape was one of numerous young artists to adopt printmaking post-war in Brazil, she was the lone printmaker included in the Grupo Frente concrete and neo-concrete exhibitions. This position placed an onus on Pape to locate her practice in relationship to countervailing trends, namely the almost rarefied emphasis on technique by the expanding ranks of printmakers versus the pursuit of universal forms by concrete and neo-concrete artists. Pape addressed this rift when she participated in a debate critic Ferreira Goulart organized in the pages of the Sunday supplement about printmaking in the winter of 1957 to 58. The debate took the form of a series of lengthy interviews with 8 prominent printmakers of different generations, as well as the publication of their responses to one another's interviews. As Goulart explained in a note to the first interview, he felt a debate about the merits of current printmaking was warranted given its trumpeting by a number of critics as the best of Brazilian art. In her interview, which the page on the left from the newspaper is where her interview appeared in December of 1957, Pape identified herself first and foremost as a vanguard artist rather than a practitioner of a given medium. However, she did not portray her choice of medium as an inconsequential one, stating, quote, "In contrast to what one supposes, in concretism it is not indifferent to make prints, paintings, or drawings. If an artist proposes a graphic problem, he will realize it in a print," end quote. In a subsequent contribution to the debate, she argued that the inherent formal qualities of printmaking, and above all those of woodblock prints, facilitate the creation of dynamic spatial relationships sought by concrete artists. She wrote, quote, "An essential characteristic of printmaking is the value given to black and white, positive and negative. In woodcuts, a void or background should not exist. Everything is form. And this is a point of encounter with so-called constructivism, with its dynamicization of the void and the very qualities of woodcut," end quote. In the March 22nd, 1959 edition of the Sunday supplement, dedicated to neo-concretism and timed to coincide with the opening of the first neo-concrete exhibition, Pape contributed a full-page essay on her prints, and I'm showing you that page here on the right. In her text, Pape related the woodcuts to the neo-concrete group's goals in much the same manner she had related them to concrete art's aims. She emphasized that the woodcut medium's formal properties, namely the intersection of planar, black and white, two-dimensional forms, can create a compelling spatial integration of positive and negative space. Where her analysis of the prints differed was her repeated use of terms like expressive and organic to describe the formal qualities of her works. This was in keeping with the neo-concrete concept of the work of art not as a machine or an object, but as a quasi-corpus. She furthermore argued that her most recent prints synthesized positive and negative space in a new way and thereby transcended the formal tensions that had previously characterized her work. She wrote, quote, "Little by little, with this integration of positive and negative, the space breaks the formal tensions, but without losing the character of a print. The space is still form. The isolated forms dynamicize this space, giving it an expressive content, arriving at the limits of printmaking, i.e. the border of painting," end quote. For Pape, these more organic, less fractured forms and spatial qualities within her recent works brought them to the edge of painting, yet she persisted in asserting that they remained prints, given that they were created by graphic means. In the 1950s, the artist viewed her concrete and neo-concrete prints as related and part of a continuum, but by 1975, Pape proposed a substantive break within her woodcut production. This revision occurred in the context of 2 exhibitions. The first, titled 40 Neo-Concrete Prints, and I'm showing the poster for that on the left, was held at a cultural institution run by the French government in Rio in July and August of 1975, and was composed of 40 prints from 1957 to 60. The second show displayed an installation provocatively titled in English, Eat Me, and subtitled in Portuguese, Gluttony or Lust, and was held at the Museum of Modern Art in Rio in December of that same year. Though this exhibition, which I'm showing you the pamphlet for on the right, did not include prints, the artist's statement discusses her works within the pamphlet. In both cases, Pape described her prints as either neo-concrete prints or woodcuts. Unmentioned in the artist's texts or interviews that accompanied these shows were the prints that she created before the neo-concrete moment, which the artist now considered to have begun in 1957, when, in the aftermath of the National Exhibition of Concrete Art, Rio artists and critics laid the groundwork for the new group. It is significant that Pape chose to dedicate her first individual exhibition to her by now historical neo-concrete production, and furthermore that she selected her prints rather than her participatory works, which I'll show you one of in a little bit, which were better known in the 60s and 70s and more readily identifiable as neo-concrete artworks. As Pape tacitly acknowledged in a pair of interviews with critic Federico Moraes that accompanied the print show's run, her representation of her works as neo-concrete artworks was part of a widespread reappraisal of neo-concretism by artists, art historians, and critics in the mid-70s in Brazil. The socio-political context for this reassessment was the then decade-long military dictatorship in Brazil. Artist Hélio Tissica had inaugurated this renewed focus in an exhibition he'd organized in 1967 entitled New Brazilian Objectivity. In his essay for that catalog, he treated neo-concrete art as a vital source for the creation of an effective, non-ideological political art. Examples of the reappraisal of neo-concretism in the mid-70s include the activities of Malas Artes, an important short-lived magazine published from the fall of '75 to the spring of '76, where key neo-concrete texts were reprinted, and critic Ronaldo Brito contributed the earliest version of his important historical text, Neo-Concretism, Peak and Rupture of the Brazilian Constructive Project. At the same time, art historian Aracy Amaral was organizing a landmark exhibition entitled The Brazilian Constructive Project in Art, which was dedicated to constructive tendencies in Brazil and would be realized in 1977. It's in the midst of this heightened attention to the history and significance of neo-concretism that Pape asserted her claim via her prints. In her interviews with Moraes and the text in the, pardon me, let me show you, I've failed to put up a slide. These are two of the works that were included in the 1975 print show, so you get a sense of the works. In her interview with Moraes and in the text in the Eat Me pamphlet, Pape explained her renewed focus on her neo-concretist wordcuts as a result of a newfound understanding of the connections within her production. She contributed this realization in part to Oiticica and cited a 1969 text on her work, which she reproduced on the verso of the poster, where he wrote, quote, "Lygia Pape is a permanently open seed for successive eruptions. Her activity creatively fluctuates like seasons, and a strange connection exists between them like a web," end quote. In the text for her exhibition, Eat Me, she proposes just such an irreverent network of associations and mapped the transformation of her aesthetic concerns into ethical ones. The first paragraph of her text begins, origin, the neo-concrete woodcuts, the topological space, still virtual, unfolding, turning, inverting, ambiguous, ambivalent, on the aesthetic plane principally, and ends, quote, now, poetic space, any language in the service of ethics, end quote.